Hi, welcome to the Tournament Center. I'm Zach Hill along with Magic Online specialist and overall good guy, Reid Duke. We're going to talk about your second draft, Reid, but before we start getting into the picks, can you just tell us a little bit about your deck?
Yeah, it's a red-black Rakdos deck with a really aggressive shell, but I've got some strong late game by picking up a couple of rares. Underworld Connections lets you draw extra cards every turn,
Right.
and then some late game combos with Goblin Rally and Dynacharge.
Cool, so let's see about how that deck came to be if we can take a look at the first slide. Now, you're talking about being an aggressive Rakdos deck. You see a couple of Rakdos cards, Rakdos Charm, Street Spasm, very good card, Goral's Chainwalker, solid guy, and yet you picked Growing Ranks, which has nothing to do with anything you've been talking about. So why you're picking Growing Ranks here?
Very close pick between Growing Ranks and Street Spasm, but Selesnya Populate is a really strong archetype,
Right.
and just being able to add a 3/3 Centaur to the board every single turn at no mana cost, it's just too good to pass up. So I think that's a good way to start a draft.
For sure. So speaking of 3/3s, let's take a look at the next slide right here. Now, you picked up a Centaur Healer. Again, Splatter Thug, totally fine Rakdos card. Grim Roustabout, reasonable Rakdos Rage Mutt. All these fine Rakdos cards. Why did we go with Centaur Healer here?
Well, it's just on par with all the Rakdos cards in the pack, and it matches the colors of my first pick. So
Right, and yet more 3/3 Centaurs to
Yeah.
sort of scale up. So we're looking to draft like a really solid green-white deck right here. Some very quality cards, but the draft ends up taking a different turn. So let's take a look at the next slide and figure out why that is.
yeah, here's Stab Wound is really the standout card. Nothing else is on its level. And Stab Wound being only single black, I figured I could pick it up, and even if I don't move into black as a color, maybe I end up with some green mana fixing, and I can play it anyway.
For sure. So you were willing to change color, right? And you can always splash it off some Golgari lands or something like that. So, all right, we see a Stab Wound here. Let's take a look at the next pick. All right, now you saw a Street Spasm in the first pack. You were saying,
I was considering first picking
Yeah.
the Street Spasm. It's really one of the strongest red cards, and getting it this late in pack one kind of shows me that nobody on my red is interested in red, and maybe there'll be good stuff to follow. So I took the Street Spasm, maybe looking to change colors into black-red.
For sure, and you're talking about changing colors. Something that's really challenging for me and that I expect to be challenging for a lot of the people watching this is realizing when you exactly are supposed to change colors. It's really hard to abandon a card like Growing Ranks.
Yeah, of course.
How do you know when to say, all right, my plan's changing, I'm gonna do something different now?
Well, a lot of times it's really tough, but this is a pretty straightforward signal. Street Spasm, only single red, one of the best red spells. It's very unlikely that people were taking other Rakdos or Izzet cards over Street Spasm.
Right.
So to get it this late shows me that everyone to my right is probably drafting the Bant colors, and red's going to be open in the future.
All right, so let's take a look at the fifth pack of pack one. Just sort of going along with the theme, and we've got Racketeer here, not a whole lot. You ended up taking Golgari Longlegs. Not the most exciting card, but not bad. Why did we go with that?
At this point, I had 2 green-white cards and 2 black-red cards,
Sure.
and green-black card that's pretty solid is probably going to end up in my deck no matter what. So.
Sure, so you're like, I'm probably going to play this, might as well pick it up. All right,
Yeah.
so let's take a look at the second pack. By this point, you've sort of solidified your deck a little bit more. You probably have a more deliberate idea of what you're going to play. See Underworld Connections here. Was that a pretty clear pick for you?
No, this was one of the tougher picks of the draft.
Oh, yeah?
The Explosive Impact is a really nice removal spell, finisher, curve topper. And if I was committed to a really aggressive red-black deck,
Sure.
I might take the Explosive Impact. But Underworld Connections is a really unique and powerful card, and just figured early on in the draft, having the chance to pick it up when I don't know exactly how my deck's going to end up, and having the chance to build around it, take the Underworld Connections here.
Yeah, you can't argue with having more cards, so let's take a look at the next pack, and that's another Underworld Connections. At this point, are you saying, like, I'm just going to double up on this and see what happens?
Yeah, this was similarly really tough because Underworld Connections, while on the one hand it's not necessarily good in multiples, on the other hand, picking up 2 pretty early gives me a little more flexibility in the rest of the draft, kind of
Right.
building around them, picking up more cheap spells, more removal. So yeah, in the end, I passed up on the Splatter Thug and took the second Connections.
Cool. All right, let's take a look at the next pack. We see a Augur Spree right here over not very much else in your colors. You got to be pretty happy to get
Yeah,
the third
perfect.
pick.
Exactly the card I want.
Awesome, yeah, and it lets you, it's pretty cheap to cast with those Underworld Connections too. Okay, let's take a look at the next pack. Now, Goblin Rally here is sort of an interesting card. Sometimes it's a is-it-ish card. It can be reduced with Electromancer. You see this Dynacharge right here.
Yeah.
Why Goblin Rally right now?
Well, we got a kind of a built-in combo with these two cards, and maybe the Dynacharge is going to wheel, but Goblin Rally is just really strong in its own right, in addition to having some kind of cool combos. But 4 guys onto the table is really good in Rakdos. Even if they have blockers, you can force through a couple points per turn, and you can chump block those big guys that are trying to race you. So I think it's a strong card.
All right, so we got Goblin Rally finally rounding out the early picks of Pack 2. A Rakdos Guildgate, this sort of brings up a broader question. I mean, clearly a Guildgate's good in a black-red deck. How do you know when you're going to want some mana fixing? Is it just, when there's nothing else in the pack?
Like you said, anytime I have a red-black deck, even if my mana's pretty good, I'm really happy to add a Guildgate to it just for more consistency. And in this pack, I have some cards that maybe are playable, but nothing I'm going to, desperately miss when I'm building my deck. So pick up the Guildgate here.
So let's move along to Pack 3 now. We talked about this combo. Dynacharge, not a whole lot else in this pack, but not a card you first picked very much. Just what was going? Were you happy to first pick this card, or?
No, this was really disappointing pack.
Sure.
Spawn of Rix Mahdi is maybe the best card in my colors, but at this point I had the 2 Underworld connections and a pretty high mana curve, so I wasn't really short on late game, vanilla creatures.
Gotcha.
But Dynacharge was going to be great with, I believe I had 2 Goblin Rallies at this point.
Okay.
And yeah, more cheap spells with the Underworld connections. Pretty good.
All right, let's take a look at what's next. So you got a Rakdos Rage Mud here. Always kind of an awkward card to evaluate for me. I mean, Haste and Lifelink, obviously a good combination, but 5 mana, 3/3, not exactly what you want. Do you like this card, or what was going on?
I do like the card, but I especially like it when you have 2 Underworld connections in your deck. Like gaining 3 life, that can represent 3 cards if the game's playing out a certain way. And a Lifelink creature with a couple Dynacharges, I'm certainly not complaining about that.
Cool. Anything else in this pack tempt you?
I think I had a Pursuit of Flight already, so picking up an Is It Guildgate might allow me to, use that card better, but pretty much it was the Rage Mud here.
All right, let's look at the next pack. We see Rakdos' Return. Now, are you using this mostly to get 2 or 3 cards out of their hand, or are you using it as a fireball?
Well, both, which is why the card is so strong. It's pretty much good at any point in the game, but mostly I like it as, knock 3 cards out of their hand. Just 3-for-1 card advantage is usually going to determine any kind of close game. And then if you top deck it on turn 15, there you
You're
go.
dead. All right, so let's take a look at the final couple of picks now. Pick 4, a Bloodfray Giant. You've got to be excited to get this late. Right?
Oh yeah, that card's amazing. Another trample creature with the Dynacharges. It's always going to be bigger than anything anybody's playing on turn 4. So that was a slam
dunk.
dunk.
Just like the Street Spasm, right? I mean, it just seems like red is really open in this draft, which you've got to be excited about.
Yeah.
Okay, so finally your 15th pick that we're going to be looking at. Pack 3, pick 5. Frostburn Weird. Looks like an Is It card. Think goes basically in any deck that's either blue or red. Are you happy to be getting this late, or is this about where you expect to see it?
Yeah, I also would have been really happy with the Explosive Impact. This was a really tough pick, but the deciding factor was that I had the strong late game Rakdos Return, 2 Underworld connections, and a high mana curve. I really wanted a creature that I could play early and play either offense or defense, depending on what my hand was dictating.
For sure. And the idea being, if you have the Underworld connections, if you have the expensive spells, you just want to survive until you get to that
Exactly.
point.
You don't want to lose the game with a handful of 5 and 6 drops. That's the worst thing that can happen.
For sure. All right. So last round, you picked up what seemed like a really tight loss against Yuya Watanabe, but in general, you feeling pretty confident about your deck?
Yeah, I like it. It's a little bizarre. It's not the typical Rakdos super aggro, but I think it's got a nice mana curve, aggressive potential, and some late game, tricks and card advantage.
Cool. Well, we'll have to see. Thanks so much, Reid.
Thanks for having
this
me.
is awesome. This is Zach Hill at the Tournament Center. Let's kick it back to Rich Hagan at the desk.